Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining. We'll have plenty of Q&A at the end, so if you want to put any questions out there, that would be awesome. Meanwhile, it's morning time for me. It's a beautiful sunny day on the East Coast of the United States in North Carolina. So I don't know if it's already evening for some of you and you're ready to relax after this. But thank you for joining me to get my day started. And we'll give just another minute here for some more people to come in before we start. And it's been so wonderful having this platform to share about our different methods and curriculum and learn new things as teachers. So I look forward to seeing lots of your presentations. Oh, hi, Ana in Portugal. Nice to have you. It's evening for you already. So we will go ahead and get started in just a moment. Oh, UK is not as sunny as Carolina right now. I'm sorry to hear that. I've got sun streaming through and beautiful fall colors. So I'm looking forward to going out and walking in the fall colors later on. So great to have you. Well, thank you to those of you who are joining us live today. And I look forward to hearing from any of you that are going to be watching this on catch up later on. You'll find our email at the very end of the presentation, and you can find my personal, I'm sorry, our website is at the very end of the slideshow, and then my personal email will be there also. So looks like we've got lots of guests from Lancaster, from Scotland, Portugal. This is awesome. All right. So for those of you who are joining me live, please feel free to put any questions that you have in the little chat box. I'll leave plenty of time at the very end to go over questions. And so I'll move through the slideshow at a pretty good clip so that we have lots of time for personal interaction. So let's go ahead and just jump in. And good morning or good afternoon to you. My name is Kim Napa, and I work at the Emerson Waldorf School in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, on the East Coast of the United States. But I'm here today on behalf of the leadership team of the Waldorf Spanish Teacher Association. I am the spokesperson. I'm on that leadership team. And we are here today to share with you the topic of how we bring the languages in the Waldorf schools. So I come to you with about 30 years of experience teaching, mostly teaching Spanish. And I've been at the Emerson Waldorf School for the past 18 years, teaching first grade through 11th grade, but primarily from first through 8th. So our topic today is teaching world languages in Waldorf schools, but they're also known as Steiner schools in some countries. So Waldorf, Steiner, they have the same principles. But we have a unique lesson structure that supports our curriculum objectives. So hopefully, no matter what your school's curriculum or methodology, you do find some takeaways that you can incorporate into your own lessons, or that there's just maybe some points and gems that resonate with you and make you want to explore further and do some own professional development research of your own. So let's get started with some slides. And first of all, I'm going to give you a very, very brief overview of Waldorf schools, Steiner schools, and how this became a worldwide educational movement. And it was founded by Rudolf Steiner. And Rudolf Steiner was an Austrian philosopher. He was an architect, a scientist, an educator, a lecturer. He did a lot of work in his lifetime. One of the main things he's known for was as the founder of anthroposophy. And anthroposophy is a philosophical movement that literally means the wisdom of the human being. He developed Waldorf education, biodynamic agriculture, and anthroposophical medicine out of anthroposophy. And his first Waldorf school was founded in 1919 in Stuttgart, Germany. Now, over 100 years later, there are over 1,000 Waldorf schools in over 60 countries. And in addition to Waldorf schools teaching the grades and all the way up through high school, there are over 1,800 Waldorf kindergartens in over 70 countries. So the basic principle, and we strive to meet these indications from Waldorf Steiner, to accept the child with reverence, educate them with love, and send them forth in freedom. Now, these are a few of the basic tenets or values that you can find in a Waldorf school or Steiner school. It's considered to be a holistic and integrated education. It's cross-curricular, my favorite aspect of it, one of them. It's immersive, it has a thematic approach. It's developmentally appropriate, and the curriculum moves from the whole to the part, and the lessons move from the whole to the part. We strive to reach the intellect through the feelings. We bring a sense of beauty, reverence, and love through an artistic approach in all of the subjects. And the idea is to be cultivating independent thinking and imagination and develop strength of will. Students create their own lesson books for the most part, throughout the grades all the way up into high school. And one thing that is unique, and I love this part, is that teacher training includes support of social emotional learning. And we do a lot of work with developing this as a teacher and how we can work with our children from a social emotional format, because relationship is such an important part of our curriculum. The teacher teaches out of freedom to meet the child's needs. And that means that I have a lot of freedom within my curriculum to strive to meet the child who's standing before me. That means that my 4th grade lessons this year might be a little bit different content-wise than they were 5 years ago, depending on who the children are and what their needs are today. And we have a focus on whole child development. Now, those are very fast, and again, feel free to look up any of those points that might resonate with you. For today, though, I'm going to focus more on the whole child development. Now, educating all aspects of the whole child, we try to find appropriate ways to meet the head, the heart, and the hand. In Waldorf education, we refer to those aspects as thinking, feeling, and willing. In striving to meet all these aspects in each and every lesson, the Waldorf teacher works out of what we call the threefold lesson approach. Now, these tenets are all interwoven throughout the curriculum and in all the subjects to varying degrees. So as we focus on this threefold lesson, that brings me to my area of specialization, which is the language teaching. And how do we bring this particular unique approach into the language classroom? So we have a lot of world languages that are taught in Waldorf schools. For example, Mandarin, Japanese, German, Spanish, French, Hebrew, Russian, Arabic, depending on where you are in the world also. Here in the Americas, we have a school in South Dakota that is teaching the indigenous Lakota language. In Guatemala, there is a school that teaches the Cachiquel Maya language. And in Peru, there is a Waldorf school that also teaches the children Quechua. So no matter which of the wide variety of languages are taught, we're all trying to meet some basic underlying objectives. Oops. And these objectives in the Waldorf curriculum they are cultivating empathy, interest in others, and social consciousness. So I try and keep these objectives, I keep these in the back of my mind as I'm preparing my lessons. And the way that I teach those is just keeping these other ideas in mind. So looking at those three objectives, these are some thoughts of why we keep these in mind. The idea is that we are encountering the otherness of a new language, and then that helps us cultivate our own better self-understanding. It also helps the child to better understand their own mother tongue and their own language arts classes that they're receiving in their school. World language studies aim to foster social pedagogy. Through stories and cultural lessons, the child recognizes humanity across cultures with diverse views. As teachers, we are striving to lead that child towards empathy and heightened social conscience through the cultural lessons. And cultivating joy and a love of language learning, we believe, leads the child to a sense of being global citizens. So again, these are some underlying objectives that I keep in mind. And now we look at the creating of a developmentally appropriate language lesson plan that incorporates all the elements of thinking, feeling, and willing. So I'm going to begin with the feeling. This is what we call the feeling realm, is what I also call the opening part of the lesson. It is our warm-up, and you might be familiar with using warm-up games and warm-up activities in your class. Our thought is that the whole class is participating. It's not just one student. The idea is that they are reconnecting with their teacher. They might only have their lesson 2 times a week, so maybe 3 days have passed. So they need to reconnect with the teacher in that relationship, and then also reconnect with the language. And we do this through using songs and verses so they can feel the sounds and the cadence and the rhythm, and they're receiving culturally authentic material. I'm not just doing a vocabulary song to teach the days of the week for the sake of the vocabulary. I do have a place for that in my lesson, but right now I want them to, whether it's a 2nd grader having a folk song, or it's a 7th grader who's learning a song from Spain if we're working on Spanish geography, I want it to be something authentic from the language. We use kinesthetics a lot in the Waldorf schools, and so naturally in the language class. Kinesthetics connected to the auditory and visual learning helps facilitate the memory and a joy of learning. And we also use it, of course, just to re-engage a child who is losing interest. The feeling aspect is also used for a recapitulation of the last lesson to prepare for the new content. And it might also include conversational exercises or vocabulary games. And of course, developmentally appropriate, it depends on the age. The children down in the corner on the desks, the younger children might be doing a poem that has the words under and over or through the woods. And we imagine we are traipsing through the woods, and they use their entire body to absorb that language. On the other side of the bottom, my 7th graders this week were absolutely thrilled to be put on a slide. So they very happily demonstrated one of their beanbag opening exercises, where they have to toss the bag, ask a question to a classmate, give the correct answer, and then choose who they get to send it to before we move on. So from that feeling part of the lesson, I move into the thinking, which is also what we would call the main body of the lesson, and reflects many components found in the traditional or textbook-based approaches. So this being the main body is going to be approximately 20 minutes if I have a 45 to 50-minute lesson. This is where I'm going to use some of those vocabulary exercises, whether it's games or conversation or little songs for the younger children. because it gives me a good transition now into the thinking portion. This is the part where I'm going to bring new content, whether it's hearing stories and folk tales in 2nd grade or reading a biography in 7th or 8th grade. I bring stories, poetry, grammar concepts, listening activities, and we might be creating sentences, whether it's practicing on the board or together as a class or writing down. And this is where we also are introducing reading, whether we're practicing as a group, which is how we start with the younger children and work towards individual reading. And then as a teacher, I'm listening for them, improving their fluency, the rhythm, and the pronunciation. The last aspect of the lesson is the willing, which, depending on the age, might be more or less. This is basically the practice portion. We practice what has been learned. The children deepen their own connection to the content. We weave together various aspects of the language. And this is the part where the child is doing writing or illustrations, recreating something, perhaps a dialogue based on the vocabulary, and their own individual work. For the older children, I might be assigning the homework and they have a few minutes to get started to make sure that there's any questions are answered. You can see from the pictures that this is where we take the content that they've learned in the thinking and they make it their own, and they add their own artistic element to it, which helps them remember better and enjoy looking at their work. So a few more thoughts to ponder about this lesson approach are to reach the intellect through the feelings. So with the younger child, we have lots more movement, and that helps them connect to the feeling. And then through that feeling, we believe then you reach the intellect. And there's so much research nowadays that that corroborates what Waldorf Steiner was talking about 100 years ago about reaching the children through stories, and then that awakens their interest in the learning. So we reach the intellect through the feelings and bring the lesson content in an artistic manner, and then the child brings their own creative element to it. This is a poem that the children in 6th and 7th grade might be memorizing, a very short poem that just shares the geography. There we have Portugal, freestyle drawn by a 7th grade student, but right there on the Iberian Peninsula. And then the next step would be that they are labeling rivers, cities, seas and oceans, and just really taking that content in deeply, because as we know, the more levels that you use to learn a language, not just the auditory, but the visual and the speaking and the writing, then they take more ownership of it, and then they can remember better. So now some practical examples of how to have this threefold approach in the middle grades. Now, because I teach 1st through 8th grade, I chose right in the middle an example from 4th grade. So using a sample lesson from an animal block. So as I said, Waldorf is cross-curricular, which is something I love. So when the 4th graders are learning about animals in a science block with their class teacher, I can bring animals into my lesson. When the 2nd graders are learning about animal fables, I bring fables in Spanish. So often whatever the class teacher has been doing in whether it's a history block or a science block or a language arts block, I can kind of piggyback on that and weave it into my own lessons. So the 4th grade child, the 10-year-old child loves animals, and this is very relevant. And so they're very interested in learning about animals in both English and in Spanish. So I prepare my feeling aspect, which I also like to call the rhythmic warm-up. And we say our greeting. We have our opening verse that they learned at the beginning of the year and we use all the way through. So at this point of the year, it's memorized. We have a review song, perhaps the favorite song about the iguana that likes to drink coffee at tea time. That's a favorite. So we just sing one of our fun songs for the joy of reconnecting with the language. And then I might be introducing a new song. So if I'm still introducing the song for the last couple of lessons, now I'm going to break it down and work on it a little bit deeper, line by line, call and response, focus on a particular aspect, such as raise your hand every time we sing the word birds, or clap with me on each noun, some little aspect that I want to start waking up the thinking aspect. But it's important to always return to the whole song in its original form at the end, not just leave it broken apart into pieces, but return to the feeling of how that song is in its original form. I often will do a number drill or a clapping pattern with the ABC drills. And now we're really warmed up into the language and ready for the thinking portion. So I also like to use vocabulary games to transition in, whether this is something, for example, you have to say the name of your favorite animal in order to sit down, or we do a beanbag where we're tossing it back and forth, and then I add questions. And so we have a little kind of a little conversation. Now, the thinking part is bringing the new content. So in this particular lesson, I might have a whole bunch of pictures of different animals I want to focus on and use them to describe color, size, habitat, food, characteristics, etc. And then I will give a little riddle to the children. And I chose elephant because it's very easy to be able to say and using gestures. I use a lot of gestures instead of just translating. It's big and it's gray and it eats plants. And I have never had a class that did not guess what the animal was. So that's my introduction. And then I could write this example on the board in the simple language that I'm going to be moving towards them using on their own. And then we practice reading it out loud together. So the last aspect of the lesson is the willing part, or the practice. Before we move into this, I might play a quick game for transition. I might have lost a few of the students, or they might be getting a little restless. And so this is what we call the breathing of the lesson. It's kind of the magic of the threefold lesson is I can have this sense that I'm breathing rhythm of concentration, and then let go and do something fun and easy, and then come back in so I can capture the children. So it might be, for example, Simon says, and then we just go through a whole bunch of our verbs that we already know. Then the children take out their pencils and their language books, and I have them copy down my example from the board. Now, some examples, well, considering with these examples, some considerations are now what I did in that threefold lesson one day can kind of get mixed up into my next lesson. So what was the new content or the thinking aspect of one lesson can then become the practice and writing or the will work of the following day. And what was maybe the will work and the writing of one lesson, then I can piggyback on that, picking up into my next lesson, and it becomes my warm-up, for example, with the riddles. And I have never met a fourth grade class in all 18 years at the Emerson Waldorf School that did not love animal riddles. So again, as I said, we have this rhythm that's woven between each of these segments to create a healthy breathing of the lesson, and this supports class management and student engagement. So here I have a few examples from my fourth graders. And I chose kind of the middle of the group. There are students who are amazing artists who are completely off the spectrum one way, and then children who are barely moving out of stick figures at the other end. So in the middle of the road here, I have how this can be broken down. So the feeling aspect of the lesson would be sharing the animal riddles, and the children enjoy listening and guessing and starting to do them on their own. Then the thinking aspect is where they are guided through my examples to create their own. So how do we make that full sentence? What is our verb? What are the different habitats that you could use? What are our adjectives to describe this animal? And they usually choose their favorite animal or an animal that they were researching in their science block. So we have all sorts of random animals. We don't just stick to the cat, the dog, the elephant, and the mouse, which they've learned over the years with me through other songs and in other places. But now it's, well, how do you say peacock in Spanish? This child had the red panda. So we've had platypus, and that's a fun one for the children to learn. It's it's all sorts of different vocabulary that's relevant to the child, and so they remember it better. So anyway, they have done the thinking aspect of creating their own examples, and now the willing is to take from their rough draft to put their final copy into their artistic book, to illustrate it, and then to share it with their classmates. Oops. Here's another example from 4th grade. Using a poem, the willing aspect, the feeling aspect is learning the poem by memory and reciting it. Yeah, seasonally appropriate. This would be one I use in January or February. So they've memorized the poem. The willing would be where they copy it down, they write it down, and they get to illustrate it. And then the thinking part is where we would be practicing reading. Even though they've memorized it from heart, now we read the words that we've written down. They practice their pronunciation. They notice things like accents, where this child actually forgot to put some of them in, but we're looking for nouns and verbs, so we can have that grammar content, and they're also deepening their understanding of the particular poem or story that we're working with. A quick example from 5th grade, moving on from those teacher-prepared riddles that they wrote out. Now we have a little bit more freestyle writing where you're using vocabulary for the family. This is actually a former student who was from Germany and had moved to North Carolina. And so she got to learn how you say the word Germany in Spanish. So the feeling was sharing with classmates about biography and warm-up questions about how many brothers and sisters do you have? What is the name of your pet? Where were you born? And then the thinking aspect would be where the child writes their own individual paragraph. But you can notice that I married that in with the willing, because these don't really stand aside as their own separate things. They're often connected. And then, of course, the feeling would be the personalized illustration, yet it's also the willing because they're writing something or drawing something of their own accord. So one thing that I want to leave you with when we're talking about this, a favorite gem that I learned from one of my mentors many years ago, was that each lesson should have something for review, something new, and something just for fun. And if we look at that from the threefold lesson approach, something review is where we have our warm-up or our practice, something new where we have our thinking content, and something just for fun, because we all need to have fun learning the language so that we have that joy that makes us just want to go out into the world and meet people from these cultures and travel to places where this language is spoken and be a global citizen. So, in conclusion of the slideshow, and then I want to open it up for the questions and answers, and I see there's a few down there. The group that brought this, again, I said I'm the spokesperson for the leadership team of the Waldorf Spanish Teachers Association. And if you happen to be a Spanish teacher and you are interested, you could contact us. The website is down there. WASTA, as we like to call it. WASTA was founded in 2013 and to this day continues to provide resources, mentoring, seminars, conferences, evaluations, and more for Spanish language teachers in the Waldorf schools. And the members are all committed to personal and professional development. They strive to create vibrant Spanish programs in their respective Waldorf schools by following the indications of Waldorf Steiner in the curriculum and really working to meet the child that stands before them. And our website is waldorfspanishteachers.org. And the leadership team currently is Diamela Wetzel, Jimena Sierra, and Barbara Waters, all located in California, Maria Creamer in New York City, and me, Kim Napa, here in North Carolina on the East Coast. So thank you. I'm going to stop share and open it up for some questions. Let's see. We have Q&A, and we also, thank you. It's kind of unusual not to see you all, but I appreciate those little hands. All right, let's see what you have in the Q&A, and then also there's some in the chat. So I need to ask, how would you use this method with the secondary school child from ages 11 through 16? Great question. As I said, it's developmentally appropriate. So with the older child, you're not going to spend as much time in that feeling realm. You'll have perhaps an opening verse, you'll have a song or a poem that you're working on. And then as you saw my 7th graders in the slide, they might have a quick exercise. There's a little bit of kinesthetic mixed in. We might be stomping and clapping while we're working on the conjugating a verb. I might say, pick an AR verb and then have one side of the room say the pronouns. The other side of the room has to say the conjugations, or they pick an activity that they're doing, stomping, clapping, and we get some kinesthetic into that warm up before they sit down. And then the thinking part is a lot longer. So again, we'd have our review of homework, conversational practice with the target vocabulary, perhaps a biography that we're reading or a history article that we're reading. And then the willing work is going to be less illustrating, although we still use that. If you saw that picture of Celia Cruz, that was after reading a biography and learning some of her music, learning how to dance salsa to one of the songs. And then the children wrote down the biography in their artistic books and got to illustrate something from the life of Celia Cruz. So that hopefully answers a little bit towards that. And just, again, we're skimming over the top right now. Okay, I do have some in the chat. Let's see. Questions here. Oh, great to see where everybody is. Yes, the idea of children standing on their desks. Some schools allow it, some schools don't. We happen to have nice, sturdy wooden desks, and so the children could stand up on them. Of course, being safe, you have to have your shoes on, no socks. No, you may not stand on that desk without the teacher's permission, so step down right now. So only if it's part of the lesson, they might step onto their chair, step onto the desk, sit down on the desk, jump to the front, hop on one foot back around to the desk. Any kinds of warm-ups where we're using the kinesthetics with the young children. So let's see, another question that came from Stanley. Yes, in a way, it's like theater therapy with pre-expression, expressive, and post-expressive phase. Yeah, I love that. I love seeing the ways that there's so much connection. I might have my own vocabulary to call something, and Waldorf schools might call something the thinking, feeling willing, and others might call it the heart, head, and hand. But we're looking at this holistic approach. Okay. Yes, thank you. Any other questions? I see that there's a hand raised. I think if you just put the question in the chat, that would be easy to get to. Christine says, I understand that Waldorf schools are private. There the children come to you ready to learn. Oh, how I wish that all of them were there to learn. Yes. How do you think this excellent method can be carried on through unwilling learners who are compelled to learn a foreign language and with consequent disciplinary problems? Excellent question. This is something that we are dealing with a lot. Because the languages are taught from first grade on and the children do not get to choose. They are in our language classes whether they want to or not. And so we do have children who don't want to be learning the language and are a little bit more unwilling. Actually, also since the pandemic, we have seen we have the highest numbers of students enrolled in our school since the beginning of the school's inception. And after the pandemic, people were really looking for ways to not have to be learning only online or so much technology and media. They wanted their children to really connect and have that social aspect. So it is a big topic. We do have disciplinary situations. We do have to have consequences. But the beauty, or the magic, I should say, the beauty of using this threefold lesson approach is that it creates this breathing. So if I have so many children nowadays that have learning differences, we have a lot of neurodiversity in our classrooms. So when you have more kinesthetic, even the child who does not need that kinesthetic work is benefiting from it, but the child who absolutely could not sit still through the lesson is getting what they need. So you bring the whole class along with them, and just having this variety and breathing back and forth through it, being able to stand up in the middle of the lesson and do a quick game before they sit down. So I don't know if that answered the question or if it was just more of a comment. And the nice thing with Waldorf is that there are many charter schools here in the United States that are employing the Waldorf method. So, and they have their own host of difficulties, strengths, and challenges with that also. Let's see. Looks like I have another question, but oh, I have to put that it was answered. Okay. Any other questions? Oh, yes, Charlie, thanks. It is a lot to think about. And what I love is just that I'm always learning myself. So even if I go to a seminar and I get one little gem, I love to go right back to my classes and implement it and see how it works. And so let's see, there are a few others raised hands. Again, if you can just if you have a question, just put it in the Q&A or the chat, and then we can share it with others. So I see some raised hands, and if you want to jot it in there, that would be awesome. Again, you are welcome. I'm going to type my email in here. knappa@emersonwaldorf.org. So you are welcome to reach out to me personally. Also, the website, the waldorfspanishteachers.org, has not only my email on it, but several other of our leadership team. And we have decades and decades of experience. So if you have all the way through high school, so if there are any questions, I would know where to direct you. Oh, let's see. You're right. I did send it to just the webinar. It says hosts and panelists. I'm going to put it in Q&A. Okay. Did that come through? Okay, just in case, I'm going to put it again right here. Okay, that should go through. Thank you for that suggestion there. Okay, well, if there are no other questions for today, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate the opportunity to share with you. And thank you to the Language Show and Linguiscope for allowing us to have this platform to share. I look forward to seeing so many of the other conferences. So thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care, everybody. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Bye. Oh, one last tip from Christine. My tip is postcards. They can be lesson materials and lesson materials for all age groups. Yes, great idea. Thank you, everyone. Yes, thank you all for spending your Sunday with me too. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.